Load at dusk, confessions by shift chain. My name is Owen, and I keep a city from going dark because people forget how loud dark is. I'm a night operator in the transmission control room. Lines, substations, breakers, the choreography of electrons that pretend to be obedient. On paper, I monitor SCADA screens, dispatch crews, authorize switching orders, and file incident reports that turn panic into paragraphs. In practice, I translate appetite. Restaurants want ovens that never apologize. Hospitals want miracles with redundant backups. Developers want cranes lit like promises. I carry a thermos that lies less than most men, a badge that opens doors and arguments, and a little brass tag stamped with my operator number that says both blame and trust know where to find me. I live with Eli. He's a public defender who bargains with gravity for a living and comes home with his tie loosened like a truce. He smells like copier toner and courtroom benches and kisses me like paperwork that believes in its own conclusion. We have a rule written on an index card under a magnet shaped like a lightning bolt. Say it by shift change. Morning crossover is 0700. We picked it after a winter when midnight honesty became theater and noon became a battlefield. The grid respects timetables more than feelings. So do we, when we're smart. The Monday the relays behaved and I didn't. Heat pressed its palm against every window in the city. We declared a conservation appeal by dusk, called for voltage reduction after midnight, and watched demand curve upward like confession. At 1:32, a capacitor bank hiccuped. At 2:05, a raccoon found religion in a transformer. At 3:17, a hospital's feeder blinked and swore it didn't. At 4:41, the joint email Eli and I use for deliveries, bills, and admissions buzzed. Thank you for your stay, the conduit. Time, 12:083:02. Points, 200 added. Shift change stood up in my chest like a supervisor and said, kindly don't. I didn't call him. Our second rule is for problems that can still be walked off, 2 loops around the catwalk before nomming it. The control room sits inside a ring of windows where the yard lights look like the language towers used to lull pilots. I walked it twice. The hum of the bus bars spoke in vowels. The map glowed like a patient. The building said the sentence concrete prefers. You already know. He introduced himself with a handshake that thought it was a resume. Thatcher Vale, he said, and a lanyard the color of expensive paperwork confirmed it. Corporate liaison, resilience initiatives. The company had flown him in to align contingencies with stakeholder commitments, which is how you say please make our promises look like engineering instead of marketing. He had a suit that treated fluorescent light as a business opportunity and a mouth that could sell a storm on umbrellas. You must be Owen, he said, not because the badge told him but because he'd memorized the rota. You keep the frequency polite. I keep it from apologizing into a blackout, I said, watching a substation's little rectangle pulse green to reassure no one. He leaned on the console next to mine with the confidence of a man who'd never been denied a chair. What does it feel like when a line trips? He asked. In your body. Does it make a noise under the skin? I hear it in my teeth, I said, sometimes in a way that makes me superstitious. He let the silence pretend to be intimacy. Drink after you hand the city to day shift, he asked. The bar at the conduit has begun to forgive me. Eli texted at 5:06, a photo of a courthouse hallway with sunlight struggling through glass block. Night calendar turned into morning. I'll be home by 7. Say it by shift change. I sent a heart and a lightning bolt and imagined the conduit's tendency to absolve receipts without comment. The conduit bar is designed to convince tired men that regret is a solvable equation. Thatcher sat where the lamps instructed cheekbones and the bartender recognized invoices. He asked me what it feels like to keep a city breathing with a cursor. I told him it feels like holding someone's head above water with two fingers because you believe in their lungs. He touched the back of my hand with two fingers like a lineman testing for live and didn't say, "Here." With his mouth, he let the elevator say it for him. His room smelled like citrus and negotiation. He kissed like a man who had been complimented on restraint and was auditioning hunger. He pressed me against the glass, and the yard lights winked like the grid flirting with its own reflection. He was generous where good biographies fund generosity and selfish, where a mouth thinks memory is somebody else's problem. I put my hands where agreements live. We left the lamp on because daylight had been written into the terms somewhere between lobby and lift. After he lay on his back and studied the sprinkler like a minor deity, then said the line men like him have in their pocket, "You'll forgive him." He was the kind of man who turns your partner into a pronoun that begs less. I said, "I'll speak by shift change," and he smiled like he'd invented the policy. Eli was already home when I came in, tie abandoned on a chair like a metaphor. He'd made coffee with the care of a defendant smuggling hope. We stood under the lightning bolt at 06:59 and I gave him nouns. Hotel, elevator, mouth, hands, yes. I did not add adjectives as if they'd counted toward mitigation. He listened like a man who has asked judges for time people didn't have. "Do you love him?" he asked, soft enough that the word love remembered it can be precise. "I loved the hour where nobody needed me to be right," I said. He nodded, took the marker from the magnet, and wrote under our rule in courtroom print, "No rooms we can't name at this table. If we break something, we break it before dusk together." He underlined together twice, capped the marker like closing arguments, and kissed my temple with the gentleness of a verdict you can live with. Thatcher didn't do endings. He hovered at the bird's-eye window during day shift and watched the yard as if it were a stage. He sent me a photo of the control room in dawn light with the caption "Proof," as if glass were an affidavit. He learned two crew leads' names and said them like keys. He wandered toward my console during a shift change briefing and asked whether our remedial load-shedding protocol could be reframed as agile demand shaping. I told him nouns don't survive that kind of adjective. The city's gossip vertical, with its narrow appetite and wide mouth, published a grainy elevator still from the conduit. My shoulder, his mouth, the caption "Operator finds alternate circuit." Eli didn't forward it. He printed it, taped it inside the cabinet where we keep the good coffee, and took it down at 07:00 to make room for a grocery list. This is how he archives. Nothing heavy where daily hands reach. Props like to audition for our story. Housekeeping at the conduit called to say there was a ring beneath the ottoman in a room tied to my loyalty number, narrow gold, engraved T+O on the inside like arithmetic that wants to be law. Not mine. The clerk asked if I wanted to claim it. "Hold for owner," I said with my operator voice, the one that makes storms wait their turn. Work tried to rescue me with honest difficulty. Clouds gathered the color of litigation. A 230 kV breaker did a stutter that makes you believe in augury. A peaker plant begged for better contracts while asking to be loved immediately. I authorized a tie, denied a backfeed, wrote an incident number on a yellow pad, and ate a granola bar that tasted like cardboard apologizing for ambition. Thatcher texted, "You're good when the room is afraid." I wrote back I prefer accurate and deleted it, because accuracy is sometimes rude. Then a small red icon lit in the corner of my SCADA screen where red is not welcome. A field device on a transfer trip took a breath it hadn't been told to take, and telemetry from a substation on the river began to lag on a heartbeat that wasn't ours. I froze changes, held a breaker sequence like a chess piece, called the sub, and listened to a relay tech swear in a dialect of electricity. Out on the yard, tucked behind a control cabinet door someone had left too generous, a cellular modem blinked its little green ambition. It had been piggybacking on a maintenance port, chattering at odd hours with an IP address that lived behind marketing's firewall. The sticker on its back bore the logo of a consultancy hired to audit resilience. Thatcher had name-dropped their founder between mouthfuls of lime and apology. I told Eli by shift change. He made coffee like a compass. "Are we trying to be interesting?" he asked, hands flat on the table like a bridge. "Or are we trying to be us?" He asks it, I have learned, not because he doubts but because he knows he can stand there until I choose. "Us," I said, and felt the city's hum move from behind my eyes back into the wall. Thatcher tried a finale only men who invoice conclusions attempt. He waited for me at the conduit's valet entrance, held the ring between two fingers so the engraving flashed like a foolish math problem, and said, "Say my name." He meant Thatcher, and also the other thing people mean when they ask to be named. "Give me jurisdiction in your mouth." "Thatcher," I said, because facts deserve pronunciation. Then I added exit, because my job is switches and sometimes the right one opens a door. The modem became a memo that became policy that became a sign on the control room door in a font that refuses to perform. External devices prohibited. All access pre-authorized. Consent is not implied. The consultancy was dismissed by a paragraph that said values twice and managed to sound like a shrug. Legal wrote "regrettable" 3 times as if it might become a breaker. We added a line to the human checklist operators recite before letting a contractor plug into anything. Who benefits if this goes well? Who pays if it doesn't? If you came for the erotics notarized, I can only inventory. There was a wall and a yes and hands where we said hands would be, a mouth that believed in the moment more than the man. The lamp stayed on because daylight had been added to the terms like a hidden line item. It was heat without metaphor, and the relief of a head that stopped calculating demand for an hour. If you came for intrigue garnished to taste, a ring with arithmetic on its inner radius, a modem with ambitions taped in a cabinet that should have held only procedure, an elevator camera that thinks it works for the arts, a control room where accuracy is a religion without hymns. If you came for redemption, grids don't sell it. We sell redundancy. The ring's other initial belonged to a man named Carter. There is always a Carter, who arrived with a lawyer whose kindness had been practiced for court and retrieved the band like it had learned to bite. He nodded at me in the conduit lobby with a face that said, "Thank you for not making me interesting." I nodded back with the face operators use when the bus goes back to green. Eli and I practiced boring until it remembered how to be a privilege. He put his hand at my throat one night in the kitchen with the gentleness of a person whose hands have never invented harm and asked, "Here." I said, "Now," because consent prefers clocks over poetry. We left the lamp on. We ate toast that burned on one edge like a compromise and laughed because you're allowed to when no alarms are sounding. Work stayed work. A summer storm bragged over the river and barely delivered rain. A kid called the outage line to say their nightlight had made them brave and could we hurry. A crew foreman reported a hawk nesting on a dead tower leg and asked for permission to let it be. I dispatched around weather and birds and human invariants. The grid breathed like a large animal that remembers it's domesticated. Sometimes at 3 in the morning I stand at the big window and look out at the yard lights writing their steady sentence. The map in the room glows, and the frequency number in the corner of my screen holds still the way a hand holds another without calling it rescue. I think of my father teaching me to strip a wire without nicking copper, how he said you can't apologize to electrons. They don't hear it. I think of the index card on the fridge, the lightning bolt magnet insisting that paper is a living document. I think of a ring engraved with arithmetic and how math doesn't care what people pretend it means. We added a line to our card because rules like company. In Eli's careful print, if you burn something, do it where I can help find water. We didn't laminate it. Paper needs breath to remember. The magnet holds. Thatcher will find another control room to haunt, another lobby to rehearse sincerity in, another ring to engrave with somebody else's initials. I will still carry a thermos, a badge, and the stubborn habit of being precise only when accuracy has already been respected. For a few hours at a time, I tell Steele which path to take so strangers can keep believing their nights are private. For a few hours at a time, I say yes to alarms and no to stories that want to rent my mouth by the hour. Then I go home if the hum lets me. I stand under a lightning bolt next to a man who translates the city into mercy. At shift change, I say the thing. We agree not to laminate it. We practice again. And when the red icon in the corner of my screen decides to audition for tragedy, I breathe, put my finger where the switch lives, and tell the grid gently to choose the right light.